Sister is lying, Andrew's voice thundered in the courtroom, cutting through the tension like a knife. The judge, a stern man in his 50s with silver hair, raised an eyebrow at the unexpected interruption. She's just a child, Your Honor. She doesn't know what she's talking about. George spat out, his face flushed with fury. The room was filled with gasps and murmurs, the weight of the moment hanging heavily in the air. Andrea, sitting beside her grandmother Mary, felt her heart race. She had never thought of speaking up like this, catching everyone by surprise. Order, Judge Miller commanded, the authority in his voice silencing the uproar. He turned his eyes to the trembling girl. Andrea, would you like to share what you mean by your sister lying? Taking a deep breath, Andrea felt the warmth of Mary's hand clasping hers, giving her the courage to speak her truth. I'm not lying, Andrea said louder than expected. I heard him, my father, talking about my mom's accident. He said it was all part of a plan, that he got her out way. Her voice quivered as she recalled that threatening conversation she overheard. George's eyes widened, his earlier confidence crumbling into fear. That's absurd. Kids imagine all sorts of things, he barked, his desperation spilling over. Let her speak, Mr. George. Judge Miller cut in sharply, his gaze fixed on Andrea, beckoning her to continue. I heard him say the words. Andrea cried, her voice breaking. He wanted the insurance money. It wasn't just an accident. He wanted to use me too. What are you talking about? George shouted, fury flashing his eyes. The judge's gaze turned to George, whose temper was now spilling into volatile behavior. This isn't how this works, Mr. George. We will not tolerate outbursts, especially under such serious accusations. Feeling empowered as her truth began to break free, Andrea glanced at Mary, who was nodding encouragingly. He was angry. I don't think he cared about us. Just about the money. Words spilled out, each one more profound than the last. He said I'd be a problem too. But Grandma, my grandmother only wants me to be safe. Silence fell again as the atmosphere in the courtroom thickened with disbelief. Even George seemed stunned. He shifted uneasily in his seat, surrounded by the weight of Andrea's accusations. The judge, supreme in his authority, leaned forward, intent on digging deeper into the child's heart. Andrea, is it true? Do you believe your father would try to harm you for the sake of money? Why, yes, she stammered, her small frame quaking, but her resolve stronger than a fortress. He said it. I heard. George's facade broke. The coldness of his gaze morphed into panic. This is nonsense, he yelled, projecting a rage that echoed against the court's walls. You'll see. She's just trying to take me down. Kids exaggerate. Enough, Judge Miller snapped, standing to emphasize his authority. Mr. George, you must understand the severity of these claims. We will not ignore what Andrea has just shared with us. His sharp gaze turned to the legal assistant. Bring in the reports from the investigation into the accident immediately. As they awaited the documentation, George's demeanor shifted from anger to desperation, his lips twitching as if he were unsure of what to say next. Your Honor, I think I can explain. There's been a misunderstanding. This isn't how it is at all, he stammered, attempting to salvage his reputation in a sinking ship of lies. The judge studied him with narrowed eyes, skepticism etched on his face. Then explain why your daughter clearly seems terrified of you. Andrea felt a flicker of satisfaction at the judge's words, but quickly pushed it aside. Behind George's massive anger, she saw the faintest trace of fear. She had turned the tide, for the first time feeling the power of her truth ready to emerge. Moments later, the assistant returned, clutching a folder of documents. The judge opened it slowly, eyes scanning the contents with an expression of growing concern. We've received the reports regarding Mrs. Sarah's accident and recent findings. It appears there are conflicting statements, and George cut in, attempting to regain control. Your Honor, I didn't tamper with anything. I can prove I'm innocent. But Judge Miller, having read through the evidence, raised a hand for silence. We'll see what the investigation unveils, but with the allegations laid out here, we cannot take any chances regarding Andrea's safety. Andrea's heart raced as she caught the hint of hope, a shred of possibility that her truth could rearrange her world into something better. I want to stay with Grandma, she declared again, stronger this time. The words felt like armor wrapping around her, empowering her fragile heart. Your Honor, George said, a last desperate plea, his tone faltering. I can change. I can be a good father. But now Andrea knew. Behind the pleas lay a darkness, and she would fight to protect herself and her grandmother from it. The judge turned away from George, focusing his attention on Andrea once more. Let's take a moment to consider the safety of the child before us. The proceedings paused, everyone holding their breath, while hope and despair danced in the air, transitioning the courtroom into a battleground for love and truth. And as the silence loomed, Andrea took Mary's hand tighter, knowing within her heart that this was just the beginning of a fight she was more than ready to take on. Because now, she had a voice, and she wouldn't be silenced again. Stop lying. I want my daughter. George's voice boomed through the courtroom, a desperate attempt to regain control, as if his shouts could turn the tide in his favor. Outbursts will not be tolerated, Mr. George, Judge Miller warned, his voice steady and authoritative. You've been given ample opportunity to respond calmly. If this continues, I may have to clear the courtroom. Andrea felt her heart race at the heightening drama, but she hadn't come this far to back down. She turned to George, her courage unyielding. You don't care about me. You care about money. Watch your mouth, Andrea, he spat, his eyes narrowing, a flicker of rage igniting in them. No, she's right, Mr. George, the judge interjected, his gaze unwavering. An accusation is only as strong as the truth behind it. We need to investigate your claims further. George's face paled, but he masked it quickly with a false bravado. I've done everything for her. Bobby and I have always provided. Bobby? Andrea interrupted, eyes wide. Who's Bobby? The question hung thick in the air, and George ceded, his composure slipping further. Don't focus on that. This is about me being a father, not whatever lies she's spinning. Enough. You're creating a spectacle, the judge snapped, turning his attention back to Andrea. Do you truly believe your father would harm you or your mother? Yes, she implored, desperation creeping into her voice. I heard him on the phone saying these things. He wants to take everything from me. The judge studied her carefully, his expression serious. Tell me exactly what you heard, Andrea. We need precision here. Andrea's breath caught as she recalled the late-night conversation that had shattered her world. He said it would be easy to get rid of Mom. He didn't care if she was gone. He just wanted the money and that I'd be next. She didn't miss George's flinch at that last word, and it sent a shiver down her spine. I didn't want to believe it, but I heard him plotting how to frame Grandma, so no one would believe the truth. Objection! George shouted, pointing a finger at her. That's slander. The judge raised an eyebrow, signaling him to calm down. This court seeks only the truth, Mr. George. Andrea, did you hear the specifics of your mother's accident being called a plot? Yes, she replied, voice shaking but resolute. He talked about how no one would question if she had an accident. He planned everything. The weight of her words cut through the room. Even the judge's impassive mask faltered for a moment. He turned to his assistant, whispering instructions to gather everything from the investigations on George's past. Moments felt like hours as tension spiraled into a tangible knot in Andrea's stomach. She glanced at Mary, whose eyes glistened with hope and worry combined. You're doing so well, my love, she whispered softly, her grip reassuring. I'm scared, Grandma, Andrea admitted, fear seeping in. Be brave. You face so much already. You're not alone, Mary encouraged, squeezing her hand tighter. The judge suddenly called for silence. With the testimony stacking against Mr. George and reports coming in, I will initiate an immediate recess. I urge everyone to reflect on the gravity of the situation. George's face turned crimson, panic overtaking bemusement. You can't do this. There's no proof. Mr. George, the judge warned, continue this disruption and I will hold you in contempt. As the court's door swung open to allow the recess, chaos erupted with people murmuring, the gravity of the allegations rippling through them. Andrea felt the weight of their eyes as they exited, their whispers merging into a cacophony of judgment and disbelief. Out of my way. George shoved past people, his anger radiating off him like heat. Andrea caught a glimpse of George's lawyer, hastily consulting a legal booklet, their brows furrowed. Right then, realization hit her like a wave. He was unsteady and vulnerable, and maybe her voice was finally changing the course of their lives. "Let's go outside for a moment, Andrea," Mary said, leading her to a quiet corner adorned with heavy drapes, shielding them from prying eyes. "I don't know if I can keep going, Grandma," Andrea admitted, tears welling in her eyes. "You have to, my love. For your mom, for yourself. It's your turn to take back your life." Just then, a figure rushed toward them. Caleb, George's trusted friend, the shadow lurking at the edges of her father's life. "You need to rethink the things you're saying in there, Andrea," he warned, his voice a low hiss. "Because if you go down this path, it won't just hurt your father. It'll hurt you too." Mary stepped in front of Andrea, a fierce protector. "Back off. She knows the truth." Caleb stalled, surprised by the strength in Mary's demeanor. "Just remember, the truth can be twisted, and you might not like where it leads." Andrea felt a surge of anger. "I don't care. It's what he deserves. You're an over-your-head little girl." Caleb's smirk returned a moment before he left, glancing back over his shoulder, a threat lingering in his gaze. Andrea inhaled sharply, the implications of his words landing heavily. What was he trying to say? "Do you think he's right?" she questioned Mary, fear creeping into her mind. "No, this is about you finding your safety now," Mary replied firmly, "and I'll always stand by you." As they re-entered the courtroom, Andrea's heart pounded like a drum. George was still bristling with agitation, but the judge's face held a new resolve. "Let's continue," Judge Miller stated, motioning for everyone to settle. "I want to ensure the integrity of this court proceeding, especially regarding the truth." With a determined breath, Andrea prepared to face whatever came next, knowing that the fight was far from over. But with Mary by her side and the truth as her ally, she felt a spark of hope ignite within her. "Your Honor," the judge continued, "we will now review the new evidence from the investigation into the vehicle that caused the tragic accident." Andrea's stomach twisted. This was it, the moment she had been waiting for. And she knew that with each revelation, they were coming closer to breaking the facade that had tried to shroud their lives in darkness. The tides were turning, and just as she thought of her mother, an image of strength and love filled her mind, fueling her resolve. She had to see this through, and as the judge called for the first witness, a chill of foreboding crept through her veins, for the truth was unfolding, and it was finally time for justice to find its way home. "Your Honor," the judge announced, calling the court to order with a heaviness in his voice, "we will begin by reviewing the evidence from the investigation regarding the vehicle accident that took the life of Mrs. Sarah." Andrea's heart raced as she turned to George, who appeared cold and calculating, as if preparing for an impending battle. "You're going down for this, Andrea," he whispered with a sinister smile. She felt dread creeping in, but she quickly shook it off. She had already faced so much, and now was not the time to shrink back. "First, I'd like to call the lead investigator to the stand," the judge ordered. A tall officer in a crisp uniform took his place before the judge, his expression serious. "The investigation revealed evidence of tampering with Mrs. Sarah's vehicle," he began, and Andrea could feel her heartbeat quicken. George's eyes flickered with unease. "Objection!" he shouted, clenching his fists. "This is all speculative. You can't prove anything." "Allow him to speak," Judge Miller commanded, giving George a pointed look. The officer continued. "We found clear signs that the brakes had been intentionally disabled. This could not have been accidental." Gasps filled the courtroom, and Andrea shot a glance at George, whose face had turned pale. "Do you have any idea who could have done such a thing?" the judge pressed. "Yes," the officer replied, adjusting his glasses. "Upon gathering further evidence, we traced suspicious calls made from Mr. George's phone to a known muscler who specializes in creating accidents that look like mere misfortunes." A collective murmur erupted, and Andrea felt ice settle in her veins. George was shaking his head, but there was no denying the trail was leading right to him. "Andrea," the judge said gently, "do you have anything to add regarding what the officers just said?" "Yes," she said, her voice steady despite the fear coursing through her. He told me he had plans to get rid of my mom. He thought no one would believe me if anything happened. I heard him planning it. George's expression twisted, anger giving way to desperation. You don't know what you're saying. You're a child. You're confused. No, she shot back, her confidence surging. I'm not confused. I'm telling the truth. Enough, the judge stated firmly, raising his hand. Mr. George, you will cease this behavior immediately. The court intends to uphold justice here. Feeling the air change in the courtroom, Andrea steadied herself. She needed to finish what she had started. Your Honor, I want to say something. I want to show you why I'm so afraid. Proceed, Judge Miller replied, intrigued. Andrea took a deep breath and closed her eyes, replaying the events that had led her here. A few weeks ago, I found something in his room, a piece of paper that mentioned a life insurance scheme. It had my mom's name on it. It listed amounts and names in a way that made it look planned, like it wasn't an accident. Turning to Mary, she saw the unyielding support in her grandmother's eyes. It's not just all in my head. I have proof that he didn't love us. He wanted the money. Where is this paper now? The judge asked sharply. I don't know, but I wish I'd kept it. He told me I should forget everything. I didn't want to believe it, but after I heard him talking about everything, I just knew he could do something awful. George exploded. That's enough. This is a farce. You think this will hold up in court? You have no real evidence. Actually, the officer interrupted, we've managed to locate an associate of Mr. George who has corroborated Andrea's testimony. With a wave of murmurs and whispers rippling through the courtroom, Andrea's heart beat faster. Bring them in, the judge commanded. The door swung open, and a man in a leather jacket walked in, his eyes darting nervously around the room before fixing on George. I'm not here to take sides, but... He began hesitantly. What Andrea said is true. Panic flashed in George's eyes. You're lying. You don't know what you're talking about. Actually, the man continued, voice firm, I know exactly what I'm talking about. I was there when George discussed his plans. I didn't think he'd go through with it, but he had this whole scheme laid out. He wanted to make it look like an accident, then live off the insurance. Gasps erupted again, and the judge leaned forward in his chair, listening intently. Your Honor, please. This is absurd. George shouted, his voice cracking. It's over, George, Andrea said, her voice a quiet strength. You won't hurt me anymore. Enough, Judge Miller commanded, silencing the chaos with an iron grip. The testimony we've just heard is substantial. We will not stand by his personal motives jeopardize a child's safety. Mr. George, you stand on the edge of serious criminal charges, and it is only a matter of time before justice prevails. The silence in the courtroom felt suffocating as George's panic seeped into every crack. You can't do this to me, he shouted, desperation clawing at his tone. I raised her. I can change. I'm sorry. Sorry? Do you think that's enough? Andrea challenged. You've already hurt so many people. I won't let you hurt anyone else. With tears streaming down her face, the fear she felt every single day transformed into power. This was the moment she had waited for. Your Honor, she pleaded, I believe he should face the consequences of what he's done, not just for me, but for my mom. The judge regarded her for a moment, a gentle, understanding gaze tempered by the seriousness of their situation. Your bravery is commendable, Andrea. We will deliberate the evidence presented and decide the appropriate course of action regarding Mr. George. The tension hung heavy as the judge called for a recess and stepped away, leaving Andrea feeling both fear and a newfound sense of freedom. As the courtroom emptied, Mary hugged her tightly. You were incredible, my love. You did it, she whispered softly, a mixture of pride and relief flooding her voice. But just as they were about to leave, George lunged forward, his voice low and dangerous. You think this is the end? You don't know who I am. You'll regret this, Andrea. You've made a mistake you can't take back. Andrea shuddered but held her ground, sweetness being the last thing she'd ever offer him. I'm not afraid of you anymore, she whispered, and with those words, she finally understood the depth of her strength. In the days that followed, the court confirmed the evidence presented, and George was arrested. The wave of his threats faded, And as Andrea and Mary walked out of the courthouse, the real world awaited them, bright, open, and full of possibilities. Their lives wouldn't be easy, but together they could build a future filled with love. Andrea held on to Mary's hand, the warmth and security remarkable after everything they'd endured. "I love you, Grandma," she said, the truth blossoming in her heart. "I really do. And I love you, my brave girl. Together, we'll be stronger than anything." As they stepped into the sunlight, a gentle breeze caressed their skin, a whisper from the past mingling with the promise of new beginnings. Andrea looked up at the sky, feeling her mother's spirit surround them. "We'll be okay, Mom," she said softly. "I promise." With that vow, they walked into their future, hearts intertwined, knowing that love was something that could never be broken, only forged anew